You run a week of heavy agentic coding on Claude Code, and the bill lands at $640. Then someone tells you, Kimi just did the same job for $45. Kimi K2 is the open weights cost disruptor. Claude Code is Anthropic's polished agentic harness, and you need to pick one before your next sprint. Test 1 is cost per token, and the number that opened this video is real. A week of heavy agentic use, same workload, same prompts. One bill comes in around $45, the other around $640. And that's not a rounding difference. That's a budget line that decides whether you can afford to run an agentic loop at all. I pulled the vendor pricing pages directly. Kimi K2 charges $0.60 per million input tokens. Claude Sonnet 4 charges $3, which is a 5x gap on input alone, and on output, it's $2.50 versus $15, which is 6x. Community reports show Kimi burns nearly 2x tokens for the same task, so the real-world savings are narrower. But that community-reported weekly gap still holds up. Kimi takes cost per token, and I expected the 2x token burn penalty to close the gap almost completely. It doesn't. Kimi is still dramatically cheaper in real sessions, so that puts Kimi up 1-0, and the title's reality check is confirmed right here. I know that cost gap because I've lived inside these tools long enough to watch it bite people on a random Tuesday afternoon. Drop a reply below if your API bill has ever shocked you mid-sprint. Test 2 is coding benchmark performance. The objection I keep hearing is that Kimi is cheaper because it's weaker, that you're trading quality for cost savings, and you'll pay for it in bad diffs and broken builds. So let's look at SWE Bench Verified and Terminal Bench, which are the closest proxies we have for real agentic coding quality. Kimi K2 thinking scores 77.5% on SWE Bench Verified. Claude Opus 4 scores 77.2%, essentially the same with Kimi barely edging it. One of the biggest problems I run into when using AI agents is turning their output into YouTube content I can actually use to market my product. That's why this video is sponsored by Subscriber, a tool that helps business owners connect their AI agents to YouTube and market their products without spending 10 hours every week creating content. You can connect Claude or ChatGPT directly to Subscriber. It then analyzes your business, website, and YouTube channel to help you create SEO-optimized video ideas, scripts, thumbnails, and even complete videos that actually match your brand. What I like most is that every week, Subscriber gives me a list of high-potential video ideas I can immediately execute, and it can even help edit videos for me, with or without my face, including videos like the one you're watching right now. It's easy to get started, and you can try Subscriber for free using the link in the description below. Now back to the video. But then on Terminal Bench, which tests agentic terminal tasks directly, Kimi K2 thinking hits 79.2%, while Claude Sonnet 4 lands at 55.2%, and that's a decisive gap you can't explain away as noise. The SWE bench number is genuinely close. 77.5% versus 77.2% is a margin so thin you shouldn't build a decision on it alone. Our terminal bench isn't close at all, and community reports from Q1 2026 put Kimi on par with the best public models in actual agentic sessions, so the weight of evidence points one way. Kimi takes coding benchmarks, and I didn't expect the terminal bench gap to be that wide. 79.2% versus 55.2% for the cheaper model is not what the "you get what you pay for" crowd predicted, so that's Kimi 2, Claude Code 0. Test 3 is speed and latency, at 120 tokens per second versus 60. The throughput difference means a long agentic loop that takes 10 minutes on one tool takes 20 on the other, and in a multi-step coding session where you're waiting on every response, that compounds fast and starts eating into your actual working day. I checked the published specs. Kimi K2 hits a 0.6 second time to first token versus Claude Sonnet 4's 1.5 seconds, which is 2.5 times faster to first response. And throughput is 120 tokens per second versus 60, exactly double. Even Kimi's slower thinking variant at 1.2 seconds still beats Claude Sonnet 4's 1.5. Kimi wins speed, and the margin is cleaner than I expected. Doubling throughput while also being 2.5 times faster on first token is a sweep of the speed dimension, so that's Kimi 3, Claude Code 0. Okay, so Kimi is cheaper, faster, and matches or beats on benchmarks. But there are still two dimensions left, and one of them is where Claude Code's architecture is genuinely different in a way that could matter a lot depending on your workflow. Context limits and deployment modality are still on the table, and they're not trivial. Test 4 is context and output limits. The cost per token price matters less if your model hits its context ceiling mid-refactor, and you have to break the job into chunks, re-inject state, and babysit the handoffs. For a large code-based refactor, running out of context is a workflow killer that wastes time and tokens. Stack these side by side. Kimi K2 runs a 256K context window versus Claude Sonnet 4's 200K, which is 28% more headroom for bigger codebases, and on max output, Kimi's 128K is exactly double Claude's 64K, which means fewer mid-task checkpoints and less state management overhead on long agentic runs. Kimi takes context and output limits too, and the output gap, being exactly double, was the number I had to check twice because it's so clean. That's Kimi 4, Claude Code 0, and Kimi has now won every dimension we've measured. Test 5 is deployment and modality, and this is where the picture changes. Your agent needs to read a screenshot of a UI bug, or parse a diagram from a design file. Kimi K2 is text only, so that prompt just fails. No image input means an entire class of agentic workflows is off the table before you write a single line of code. I ran this twice to make sure I read it right. Claude Code supports image input with both Sonnet 4 and Opus 4. Kimi K2 is strictly text only. On the other side, Kimi is open weights and self-hostable. Claude Code is proprietary and API only. Community reports also flag Windows gaps for Claude Code and session switching instability for Kimi, so neither platform is spotless. Kimi's open weights and self-hosting freedom is a real win for teams with data privacy requirements or infrastructure control needs, and I don't want to gloss over that. But if your workflow touches image input at all, Claude Code is the only option on the table, and that's a hard capability wall, not a preference. Claude Code takes deployment and modality. Multimodal input is a genuine capability gap, not a polished difference, and that's the only category where it pulls ahead. Final score, Kimi 4, Claude Code 1. Kimi K2 wins on cost, $0.60 per million input tokens versus $3, and real-world sessions land around $45 a week versus $640. It wins on speed at 120 tokens per second and Arrow 6-second first token latency. It wins on context at 256K versus 200K and double the output limit. And it matches or beats Claude on coding benchmarks. Claude Code wins on multimodal input. Image support with Sonnet 4 and Opus 4 is a hard capability Kimi doesn't have. It wins on token efficiency per task, burning roughly half the tokens Kimi does for equivalent work. And it runs a tighter, more polished proprietary harness with fewer reported session stability issues than Kimi's current implementation. The $640 reality check doesn't beat either tool, it's the number that makes you stop and ask whether your current setup is actually justified. If you're spending Claude Code API rates without knowing Kimi exists, that weekly bill is the wake-up call that sends you back to this comparison. If your workflow is text-only agentic coding, and that weekly cost gap matters, Kimi K2 is your pick. It's faster, cheaper, and it holds its own on benchmarks. If you need image input or a rock-solid proprietary harness with tighter token efficiency, Claude Code is worth the 5 to 6 times premium. One thing that didn't show up in any benchmark. Kimi K2 has documented session switching instability. If you're running multiple parallel agentic sessions and you switch between them, you can lose context state mid-task. The docs don't warn you about it. And it's a real workflow edge that could cost you more time than the cheaper token price saves. If this comparison got you thinking about where Kimi stacks up more broadly, I've got a full head-to-head on Kimi versus GPT, and the results there are a lot closer than you'd expect, so that one's worth a look right after this.